Alright folks, let's do the new moon in Scorpio solar eclipse video. I always like to do my videos after a new moon solar eclipse. I wanted to do this for the past 2 days. I'm finally getting down to it. It doesn't matter. Here it is. I'm doing it now. This is the appointed time, so to speak, it seems. So it's a new moon solar eclipse. I'm not going to, those of you who watch my channel, I'm not going to get silly about this. I'm not going to talk about phoenixes and Scorpio as a sign and this, that, and the other, unless I want to focus on the practical applications and the practical experience of what it is that this eclipse is going to feel like and where it sits and its conjunction to Venus and all that kind of stuff. So you want something irrespective. You know where to go, whether it is to a book or a video, or you know where to go to find what it is that you need. Let's focus on what we need to focus on from my perspective with this eclipse. I've referred to the period we're in, and this particular new moon, which is really occurring in about 14 hours time, it's like 3:42 a.m. or something along those lines, on the 25th for me, Pacific time. However that translates, you'll know when it's happening for you. We have eclipses going on in the signs of Taurus. Those are the North Node eclipses, and the South Node eclipses in Scorpio. The first of the South Node eclipses in Scorpio occurred on May the 15th of this year. And the week of March the 15th, week before, week after, and May the 15th, week before, week after, would have events that I would consider would be related to this eclipse of release. It's a South Node eclipse. Behaviors, patterns, attachments to ways of being that are subconscious strengths and that we exhibit and deploy without thinking because they are strengths, like an overly developed muscle, but have outworn their purpose and are fundamentally no longer useful to us. Related to both the sign of Scorpio and where it sits in your chart. In other words, what house it occupies and what that house stands for. Interestingly, when I look back to especially the May 15th date, for me, the developments that occurred there were much more related to the Taurus North Node, the Taurus part of my chart than the Scorpio part of my chart. But often remember, what needs to be released is that if you are exhibiting behaviors that are too scorpionic or that are too close to the strengths of the house occupied by Scorpio in your chart, it may very well be that even if the developments are occurring related to the Taurus part of your chart, where the North Node leaning into eclipse are taking place, there's a sign or a signal that there's a behavior or a pattern in the Scorpio or the Scorpio house occupied part of your chart that needs to be released. It may not be a thing. It may be a behavior or a pattern. With the sign of Scorpio, I think the word that I will use is enmeshment, emotional enmeshment, closeness, codependency, dependencies, as opposed to the sign of Taurus, which focuses on independence. I'll be criticized for well, I can be criticized all I want, but all anyone wants, but I will stick to that. I will stick to those words. So wherever there are tangles and ties between people, I think it's worth it to say that those stand to get tested emotionally. And here I'm talking to the Scorpio nature of the eclipse, but the fact that it's a new moon solar eclipse in Scorpio, those are likely to get to emotional closeness, financial closeness, the link between the two, in marriages, in contracts. Boundaries is such an important word when it comes to the Taurus-Scorpio axis. And who do you want to be enmeshed with? Who do you want to give your heart to? Who do you want to give the keys to your kingdom to? And who has them, who has forcibly taken them, where have you found yourself in a situation where you're feeling like the keys to your own kingdom, however you define it, need to be protected. All of that comes up. Now, if you are, again, this very much depends on the house Scorpio occupies in your chart. So look to that when you look at all these dates that I'm going to tell you. The next set of dates that are relevant and important, of course, are tomorrow, the 25th, when we have the solar eclipse in Scorpio. And this carries a little bit more weight to me than the March and May dates earlier this year, because the Scorpio solar eclipse ends 6 months later in 2023 on May the 5th with a corresponding lunar eclipse. So when I look at the eclipse cycles, and after that we have no further eclipses in Scorpio. We will have a further eclipse in Taurus at the end of next year. So this Taurus-Scorpio axis remains active till the end of next year. While next year we start to move into the Aries-Libra eclipse axis as well. This year we're very much in this Taurus-Scorpio eclipse axis, and this particular Scorpio north node, south node eclipse is intriguing to me because it has a correspondence. So there's something that brackets this experience as we head towards May the 5th. So the dates of October 25th, December 25th, March the 5th, and May the 5th become important points, in my humble opinion, with this eclipse the week before and week after. About a week before, I have told you in my last couple of videos, or at least my last video, that October 18th to November 18th, you may want to, of 2022, you may want to view that as sort of being the whirlpool of the eclipses of this year. We've got the the new moon solar eclipse tomorrow, and then we have on November the 8th the Taurus lunar eclipse. A lot of us have felt eclipse events, eclipsey energy, because of this November 8th Taurus full moon lunar eclipse on or around September 8th, the week before, week after. Situations being eclipsed in and out of our lives, important developments. Some of these developments, so you can even go back to that week before and after September 8th. We're here now, October 25th. We've got November 8th. So since September the 8th, something continues to escalate and reaches some sort of, I don't know what, climax. I'll talk about that when I do the video for the Taurus eclipse. With the Scorpio eclipse tomorrow, just, if you know where Scorpio sits in your chart, you've started to feel the rumblings over the last week. And after tomorrow, after the new moon solar eclipse, you will feel it even more, and there will be an acceleration of that as you head towards December 25th, a kind of period between December 25th and March the 5th when everything that needs to fall to the floor will have fallen to the floor, and you'll be like contemplating what needs to happen. And then from March the 5th to May the 5th, a sort of conclusion of events or a tying up of events. What do you need to release in the Scorpio part of the chart? Certainly boundaries, involvements, who you give your heart to, and I'm not just talking romantically. Marriage is certainly, I find, very much a Scorpionic. People will attribute it to the sign of Libra, and that's fine. You're right in a way, but it is in Scorpio where the magic happens or things fall apart. And this question of who are you involved in, and is the magic happening or are things falling apart? You are going to be in that space when it comes to this eclipse, this particular eclipse tomorrow, and in this cycle over the next 6 months. Who is in the boat with you? Who have you given the keys of your kingdom to? Where do the boundaries need to be? Who have you given your heart to? Who are you enmeshed with? Where are there contracts? And where written, unspoken, your understanding, their understanding, clarity, lack of clarity, and where are there consequences of those contracts and those agreements, perceived or real? But the Scorpio part of your chart, and the house that is occupied by Scorpio, something there needs to be released too. It could be an attachment to how you think things need to be. It could be behaviors associated with that part of the chart. Or it could be something physical. I wouldn't be surprised if with this eclipse cycle of the next 6 months, it's a combination of all of the above. The new moon solar eclipse, my darlings, is conjunct Venus, and it is in Scorpio. Neither the moon nor Venus are particularly comfortable in Scorpio, another Mars-ruled sign. Scorpio ruled by Mars and Pluto in 2022. So a feeling of unrest, insecurity, lack of contentment it was present at the Aries full moon 2 weeks ago, and we continue this trend with the Scorpio new moon. Continues to be present. And with the new moon being conjunct Venus, again, relationships, money, opportunities. 2 days ago, the Sun conjuncted Venus. Now, yes, there are two things about this eclipse that are worth knowing. The Sun conjunction to Venus 2 days ago occurred in Libra for the first time in God knows how many years, and there are plenty of videos out there that will get esoteric on your butt on that. So by all means, if you want to get esoteric on your butt, up your butt, down your butt on that, you have plenty of resources to look at. Try to remain grounded and be a person of action and not spend your days watching YouTube videos or pulling tarot cards. Ultimately, all of this needs to translate into what we take from it and what we construct, and how we need to give the transits an opportunity to interact with what we're doing and how we're going about doing it. The other thing that I will also say is, yes, this eclipse point, especially when I look back to 2003, where the last set of Scorpio and Taurus eclipses of this kind took place, it's a new eclipse point. And the way the Taurus eclipses roll out over the next year are different from the way that they rolled out in 2003. Very often when you look back to the last set, you can see exact decrees being replicated again. And that's not quite the case. It's going to be the case to a large extent with the lunar eclipse on May the 5th. That's certainly not the case with this. What I want to say about the conjunction to Venus being combust, and I find that when a planet, and there's all this talk about, oh, it's a full Venus as opposed to a new Venus, fine. If that helps you or that tells you something, great, wonderful. And I do find discussions of Venus star points, etc., fascinating and interesting. And yeah, okay, fine. Let me stay practical. In a sense, when you study the Venus cycle, yes, this is a full Venus. But for me, it is Venus conjunct the Sun. It is combust. It is a new Venus. In the same way that any planet, when the moon is combust and conjunct the Sun and dark, it's a new moon. When a planet conjuncts the Sun and is burned up by the Sun and is combust, and in classical or ancient astrology, it loses its power, I find that what is going on is that it is somehow communing with that kind of divine energy in all of us that knows and that is actually directing the ship. The Sun is not an overt factor, I find more and more. It is the center. It is the connection to our sort of overall divine intelligence. Some people call it or refer to it as kind of soul knowledge. You can. But with the moon, this happens every 28 days. It's a refresh. It's a reset. What do we know now? And what do you need to know, planet that is merging with the Sun and moving ahead from it, as Venus has started to do, as you move forward? It would not surprise me if, as of 2 days ago, now, Venus conjuncts the Sun every, 9 or 10 months or something like that? But just as the moon conjuncts the Sun every 28 days. But it's a reset that needs to happen, and it's a reset that allows us, in its best sense of the word, to level up based on what we know with regard to our relation to our self-worth. And I think that we're entering this eclipse dealing with the consequences of the eclipse and the whirlpool and God taking the wheel and things getting shaken up and changes occurring that we have no control over and that we, in a sense, have not initiated. We might be catching up karmically to some things that we have either done or not done or taken care of or not taken care of as a result of what these changes bring and slap us in the face with, which is very eclipsy. People, situations, things being eclipsed in and out of our lives. But at the same time, some element when it comes to eclipses, there's a fated element to it. It's out of our control. God has taken the wheel. all you can do is sit in the car and just know there's another force that is at work when we're talking about eclipses, especially, and it's very palpably felt with regard to some of the changes occurring directly around the time of the eclipses. I've talked about the relationship of eclipses and mortality, irrespective. People around us, people close to us getting news or information that may impact our mortality in some sense in the shorter term or the longer term. Signals, signs. Okay. Now, when it comes to, on the one hand, we're going to be dealing with at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if we're coming into this eclipse cycle armed, in a certain sense, with a renewed vigor and sense of what we will and will not tolerate or put up with or manage or not do. We come into this eclipse cycle with a new Venus. It's conjunct Venus. So the words opportunity and the term that I've used before, the fact that ironically we have to fight for peace, both of those seem very, very relevant and germane to this eclipse and the next 6 months with this eclipse cycle. It is an eclipse in Scorpio. It is about relationships and entanglements, emotional and financial. And the tacit agreements, not always written, tacit agreements, said not, expectations that go along with our relationships, personal, business, landlords, whatever. And it will take a while for Venus to separate and become bright again. We know this. But we're coming into this eclipse 2 days ago with the Sun and Venus being conjunct and the new moon conjuncting Venus. So creatively, relationship-wise, financially, in terms of our independence, in terms of there is an opportunity with this eclipse. And we will come into it. It is a shakeup, but it is a kind of shakeup that will allow us to lean into the Taurus part of our chart where the North Node eclipses are taking place. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to have an eclipse there. And somewhere, the other primary transits happening are at the time of this eclipses that are encoded have to do with Mercury, have to do with communication. Mercury squares Pluto, it trines Mars, a stationary Mars in Gemini. If you feel that something needs to be communicated that protects or protects or communicates your sense of boundaries, particularly to a situation that may be trying to control you or manage you or create a sense of obligation or entrap you, your instincts may not be wrong. Now, you take from this what it is and take responsibility for any actions you take and blah, blah, all the standard disclaimers that should go along with astrology videos apply. The transit, for me, feels clear. We're coming into this with a sense of what is working, what is not working, and discontent and insecurity. And the ground is being shaken from under our feet. And that process started for a lot of us around September the 10th, September 8th, the week before, week after. But we're coming into it with a renewed sense. I think there's an opportunity to come into it, not only to avail of new opportunity, but to the opportunity to avail of releasing something in the Scorpio part of the chart, to take advantage of what is next. Be very careful of labeling situations as being good, bad, difficult, or easy, or positive, or negative. Try to understand what is being wrested away from you and see if you want to put up a fight or not, but be open to the idea that maybe it being wrested from you in the long term may or may not be a bad thing, good or bad thing. You know, with eclipses, like with Jupiter, when these kinds of fated things start to happen, we start to put labels on them with regard to how we experience them that may or may not be helpful. The only thing that matters related to this eclipse is whether something is working for you or not. And if you feel like you need to communicate something soon or shortly to get that ball rolling, your instincts might be right. Think about it, make your own decision around it, and then see where it takes you. You have the dates related to this eclipse. I've given you the primary symbology around it. It is conjunct Venus, so opportunities in the air in the Scorpio part of your chart, but that may need to come with a release, and the process might take 6 months of something, or release of something. Two words, opportunity, and the term, a fight for peace. Okay, we'll see how these eclipses continue to develop. There are two cycles with this eclipse, a 6-month cycle that I talked about, and the next 2 weeks that take us to the Taurus eclipse. Why is it that in the United States, elections are so tied to Taurus full moons? Anyway, that should be interesting. And that eclipse, this eclipse, strangely, is a portal opening. It is a welcoming eclipse, all said and done. The November 8th eclipse that some of you have felt on September 8th, you know, when lightning strikes and it's conjunct Uranus and it leads you towards greater authenticity and liberation, all of those are lovely words, but that's the Hellfire eclipse. This is, and you know, again, you may feel it very differently. You may come into this eclipse with anxiety and discontent and insecurity, and that's fine, because it's what you need in order to evaluate what is working for you and what is not. But there's also an opportunity with it. The eclipse 2 weeks from now, we'll talk about that later. If you found this useful, share it, tell your friends about it, tell your friends about my channel. You know I'm an infrequent poster, but I enjoy doing what I do, and I really appreciate everyone who sticks with me, actually, more than anything else. Feel free to comment, like the video. All of that gives it, I think, more traffic on YouTube. And especially since I'm posting this before a new moon, chances are on its own, it's going to need the boost. Click on the bell icon next to the subscribe button and the wiggly bell thing on top to be notified when I do new videos, and subscribe to my channel. All that PR stuff is done. I leave you to it. Pay attention to what happens over the next 3 weeks. Make stock of what has been going on over the past week. Okay? The Scorpio Taurus eclipses continue into next year. I will leave you to it.